Welcome to the Actor's Side. Today we have a triple threat, actually. You won the Tony, the Oscar, and the Emmy in the shortest time as the youngest person ever to do that. Congratulations, Geoffrey Rush.
Thank you.
Right here,
Thank
yeah.
you.
You are a man for all seasons, for all kinds of mediums, obviously, to have accomplished that kind of record and so much that you've done in your career, which I just can't believe it's nearing half a century you've been acting professionally, I guess.
Yeah, I started at the end of 1971.
Yeah.
I was 20, and I literally got straight out of my Bachelor of Arts degree, which was, for me, like a time filler. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I thought, well, at least learn stuff about literature and whatever. And I did my final exam on a Friday and on the Monday morning, because the life on campus was very political. It was the hub of the theatre scene in Brisbane at the time. And this director of the newly formed State Theatre Company had seen me doing a review which involved a sketch of where I was naked. And I always like to think he gave me the job because he saw a big future in front of me.
What a way to get a job.
Yeah.
That was a Queensland
Theatre Company,
which you were in for a long time.
I had a 3-year contract, which that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah. And then I went over to Paris and studied, and came back to Australia and spent more time on long-term contracts, and had an association with Belvoir Theatre in Sydney on and off over a period of 15 years and stuff.
You've played so many, I've talked to you before, so many roles. I can't imagine what you haven't played. You just did recently King Lear. You even did Lady Bracknell. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've done Snoopy.
Once I turned 60, the roles start to get less, kind of.
Really?
And there are certain ones you think, that would be a challenge, that would be interesting. And the reason Lady Bracknell came up was that I had been in the same production with this really brilliant, quite smart, radical design that wasn't like an authentic drawing room in Mayfair or Grosvenor Square or whatever. It was sort of set on this Aubrey Beardsley pop-out yellow book, which was the Aesthete's Bible, and one actor would play Lane and Merriman, and they were kind of like a host that would open the book, and the Aubrey Beardsley scenery would come out, and so forth. And I played Jack Worthing, and my wife played Gwendolyn. And then some years later, we'd all aged, and the guy that had originally played Canon Chasuble said, "Why don't we do it again? I think it was such a success, and it was, I think, a very good production." I said, "Yeah, but there's nothing really for me." And he said, "You played Bracknell. Come on, you're kidding?" So I plunged into that. I treated it very seriously. I didn't want it to be like a drag act or anything.
Right.
You can't comment on Wilde because his commentary within the play is already just so brilliant and smart. The wit is fantastic.
How did Shine change your life? You had done very few movies before suddenly everything changed. Had to.
Yeah, I was so entrenched in a successful and fruitful and ongoing theatrical life, you know what I mean? I was hardly out of work, and jobs kept coming, and that was very pleasurable and very rewarding. And in those days, back in 1980, I think in the 1 year I did what a colleague of mine described as the scale of the roles I did were equivalent to the third rat on the coach in Cinderella. They weren't big parts. They weren't even cameos. They were walk-ons, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it never really happened. And then around the mid-90s, I happened to do 3 Australian films in a row. Shine was the second of that. And I thought, yeah, great, this is nice. And then I'll go back to the theatre. And we didn't foresee the kind of trajectory that Shine was going to go on, you know.
That
was
international success that.
Yeah, but you know, there'd been films like Breaker Morant, and in that golden age we were talking about earlier, and Gallipoli, and you know, Peter Weir is a global master filmmaker, you know. But there was something about this one wasn't about our pioneering days, or you know, it was about a classical pianist.
Yeah.
For starters, you know, we wanted to avoid the biopic feel, you know. It wasn't Cornel Wilde playing Chopin. I think Cornel Wilde did it. I can't remember. There were lots of biopic musical films and stuff like that.
Plus, you knew how to play the piano, so they
Well,
didn't
look
have
as
to.
though I played the piano.
They
yeah.
didn't have
But
to.
that was all. That my hands never left the end of my wrists. You know, I mean, that was me. In
That
there,
was
but
you.
that was
You
all
know,
I-
usually in the old movies where you know you have a pianist, they cut away and bring in the stunt
I remember
double.
a comedian on something like the Red Skelton show. He says that there's a technique to it. You shoot over the piano and then you pull round, and what they're doing, he said, you're counting your money that you're getting for the gig to get the right shoulder movement. I always thought that was pretty
That's
clever.
right. Well, we know you did it very authentically, and of course won the Oscar, and then a whole slew of films. You've been in. I looked at so many movies that were nominated or won the Best Picture Oscar, and so many good ones, from The King's Speech and Munich. And I'm thinking of these movies that really hang on. You look carefully, it seems to me, at the kind of movies that you want to be in.
Yes, there's no rule book. I don't kind of have a tick list of criteria. It's all an intuitive thing. But I suppose when I look back at them in hindsight, I don't read my CV on a daily basis or anything like that. But you know, off the top of my head, when I was prepping for this role, and I thought, oh, geez, he is really well known. You know what I mean? Like, this is an iconic face.
Yeah.
The Marquis de Sade, most people would have no
Right.
idea of what he looked like or whatever, you know, as an example. But what they have in common is that a lot of them are people who seem to be a very interesting but unusual central protagonist in an era of history that I find myself personally fascinating. And if you're going to be on it for 3 or 4 months, I like that sense of immersion into, you know, with The Book Thief, Emily and I, again, German husband and wife in Einstein, were German husband and wife in that.
Yeah.
But I remember all of my study for The Book Thief was reading books of what was daily life in the country like under the Third Reich.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and you just absorb so much. It just broadens your knowledge.
What is time? A deceptively simple question, yet it is the key to understanding relativity. It is also the reason my hair is going grey. When we describe motion, we do so as a function of time. 10 meters per second, 100 miles per hour. But the mathematical description of velocity is moot, unless we can define time. Is time universal? In other words, is there an audible tick-tock throughout the galaxy? A master clock, so to speak, forging ahead like Mozart's metronome? The answer, my friends, is no. Time is not absolute. In fact, for us believing physicists, the distinction between the past, present, and future is but a stubborn illusion.
And when you mentioned a Genius here, which is your new project, which Ron Howard has directed the first episode, and you're sharing a role here with Johnny Flynn, playing the genius at different ages. I have to say, you mentioned the Marquis de Sade and other real-life roles you played, Trotsky as well. Have you ever played a genius before besides David Helf? God, he's a genius in his own way.
Yeah.
Peter Sellers, he's certainly a genius in his own way.
Yes. Well, yes. Genius is it's a scary word because you know in Australia, and I'm sure it happens globally. You know, people might describe a dessert as genius to compliment the chef. You know what I mean? You go, it's not quite the right use of the word.
It opens with, something you don't expect when you see a show about Albert Einstein.
Yes.
Yeah. He's basically having sex and he's You know, you got to see the show. But I mean,
Page two of the script, when I read it, you're following this character called Walter Rathenau, who was a member of the German parliament at that stage, and this is in 1921. And by the end of the first page, into the second page, he's shot by basically a kind of radical terrorist group, literally assassinated on the street. It's a real jolt. And he was a very prominent German Jew, but saw himself as a Prussian before anything else.
right, yeah.
And then on the page after that, just prior to giving a lecture, Albert Einstein is in a relationship. Not only he's married to Elsa, of course, but he is having an extramarital affair with his secretary, Betty Neumann. And that's the first image you get of Einstein.
Very first image. He's doing a lot of his genius stuff on the back of her dress even. It's incredible. Ron Howard is a terrific director and did produce this series.
Well, I think they were determined, you know, there's the great legacy of National Geographic from the days of the magazine, which I think was like 130 years ago.
Oh,
it's
one of the oldest.
Traditional, you know. Yeah. And then the fame the channel has for the kind of macro natural history photography that they've made their own, you know what I mean? Yeah. Really, like, brilliant. So moving into their first scripted drama series, I think they wanted to humanize who was this man, because everyone knows him as a kind of two-dimensional photo, and that he was bright, you know, but not much about his life. There was so little of his domestic marital life that I knew about before we started working on this. And his, at times, political involvements and his religious involvements and so forth. So they wanted to go, so we can't do this as a film because his life spans 76 extraordinary years, you know, from a great, the kind of scientific and industrial developments in the late 19th century Europe, whether it's the invention of the cinema or the automobile or what the Curies were doing or the discovery of X-rays and Marconi and the wireless, you know what I mean?
Right.
He was in his 20s when all this was going on. And it just seems he's a wonderful central protagonist to have move into the 20th century in probably one of the most tumultuous generations in human history, I would have thought, with the two massive global conflicts. When the theories were ultimately proved to be absolutely right in 1919, his overnight celebrity was as big as Chaplin.
Yeah.
You know, in a different way to how we see celebrity today, you know.
Chaplin's your favorite, right?
Yeah.
I read somewhere that you actually show City Lights to anybody that has never seen it.
Yeah.
Which is amazing to me that there are people that haven't seen it, but that
it's now 87 years old. And it just for the narrative that's in it, and the gag structure that's in it, because he still made it, he wrote the music for it. It was a sound film, but it was still intertitled.
He's a genius.
Yeah, I would say so.
I can use that.
The other ingredients seem to be that people are polymaths. You know, you look at Da Vinci and you go, not only did he design military equipment, he happened to paint the Last Supper and the Mona Lisa, you know. And then he was doing drawings based on the anatomy of birds for flying, to try and develop a flying machine.
Right.
Back in the 15th century. You know.
Amazing.
I know,
Amazing.
It's extraordinary.
Now, people are going to see you on the big screen at the same time they're watching you on the small screen as Albert Einstein. They're going to see you again as Captain Barbossa in, this is your fourth go-around in this role.
Fifth. Well, I had a sort of walk-down cameo surprise entrance
in that one. But this is in terms of having the full-blown role here. In the series that never ends. It's so successful. So successful that I understand you're actually a part, you voiced the actual ride at Disneyland.
Yeah, that was, you know, there wasn't a great deal of money involved in that, I have to say. But, you know, the honor is you are part of that tradition. I think, when did Walt Disney create the ride? In the 60s?
In the 60s,
mid-60s,
yeah.
I think. It was the last thing he worked on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the film did well, and the franchise has always done well.
Well, and Johnny Depp, just so
Yeah.
brilliant.
Well,
It's,
Espen and Joachim, the two Norwegian boys who directed it, they have such a... They were watching the first film when they were in college, and they were huge fans. And they've got that kind of instinctive, droll, deadpan Buster Keaton sort of humor.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's a very good fit with the Jack Sparrow character.
yeah. So much fun to see you in all kinds of different roles now, from Genius to Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and on and on. I just always look forward to what you're going to do next, Geoffrey Rush. So thank you so much for coming
Thanks,
out.
Pete. Good to see you again. Thank you.
Thanks.